Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be joining our panel here today. They have some really, really interesting innovations, and you're going to be able to hear from these exciting entrepreneurs about their experiences of obtaining their patents and how their patents drove their businesses to success. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them first, and then we're going to get into kind of a round robin of some questions and let them take it away. So I'll start here. We have, and if you want to give us a little wave there so we'll know who we have. First, we have Sherrill Mosey. She is, excuse me, I got a little bit of technical difficulty here. Something happened. There we go. She's the CEO of Minky Blue Bags. And next, we have Dahlia Risk. She's CEO and founder of Buckle Me Baby Coats. Next, we have Jake Sendowski, founder of Super Cubes. And last but not least, we have Robbie Cabral, who's CEO and founder of Bench Lock. So we'll go ahead and get started here. As we start, I'm going to have a basic, and we can start kind of in the same order there with Sherrill, and then go around to everybody else. So first, I just want to have everybody. There's such interesting products. I just want to give you the opportunity yourselves to give an overview of what your product is and have each of you tell us a little bit about yourself as well and your business. So we'll start with you, Sherrill. Take it away.
Thank you, Carlos. I am so geeked out about being a part of this panel. So thank you so much for having me on. Again, my name is Sherrill Mosey, and the name of my company is called Minky Blue. And I started it years ago. I was the bag lady. I was taking the train in the city and I was struggling carrying my backpack, my book bag, my purse. I had shoes in my bag. And I just wanted one bag where I could organize and separate everything in the bag and not be cluttered with all different kinds of stuff carrying 2 or 3 bags. And so I came up with the idea for Minky Blue, which is a patented folding shelf right in the middle of the bag that allows you to organize and separate your items in the bag. So I can't wait to share it with you.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute. Thank you, Sherrill. Dahlia, we'll have you go next.
So I'm Dahlia Rizek. I'm the founder of Buckle Me Baby Coats. When I had my first child, I was super paranoid about the car seat. I wanted to make sure she had the safest seat. And in the wintertime, I'd have her in the car seat, something like this, just the buckles over it. And I thought that was fine. And then I talked to a child passenger safety tech who told me that that's actually really dangerous. And going into a car crash like this could lead to brain, neck, and spine injuries, which no parent, of course, wants that. And I tried taking her coat off. It was a big struggle. And then I realized one day if I redesign the coat, the problem isn't the rules, the problem's the coat. If I redesign the coat so that you could pull the front panel out of the way like this, then the coat could stay on. Your kid could be warm, but they could also be buckled in safely. I talked to a lot of big guys, big corporations. They weren't interested, so I decided to do it myself.
Excellent. Thank you, Dahlia. I have a lot of little follow-up questions about that because I'm sure that's a common experience for many entrepreneurs that have to say, take things into their own hands and move forward themselves. We'll go on next to you, Jake.
Hi. Thanks so much. It's great to be here, and it's so fun to be on here with all the other panelists and their fantastic inventions. So my co-founders and I created Super Cubes. It's a line of freezing trays made out of silicone to help people freeze food in individual portions. We have trays that can help you freeze in 1 cup portion like this one, 2 cup portions like this big guy over here if you want more food, 2 tablespoon portions if you want to freeze things like tomato paste that usually get rotten in the fridge after you open the little can, or 1/2 cup portions, which are great for things like sauces, salsa, condiments, things like that. We have a few other products too that have kind of come along as we've grown the company. But the impetus for us creating this company was my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and I were in a market talking about making soup and talking about freezing it and just kind of lamenting the fact that you have to freeze things in gigantic containers or in a bag and it's a mess. And so she was telling me about how she might freeze things sometimes in ice cube trays. And I thought, why isn't there a big ice cube tray with a fill line so that you know exactly how much chicken stock you want to take out of the freezer? And we looked for it and it didn't exist. And so I thought, this is easy enough. I could design and we could try to make this on the side of my regular job. And so we kind of got started like that, and then it took over. And now it's taken over our lives, and we have employees and everything. So it's been quite the journey.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview, Jake. Next, Robbie, take it away.
I need to get one of those, Jacob. I have to say that we do a lot of home cooking and all that at home. So anyhow, my name is Robbie. What's interesting about my story is that I never really intended in creating a business or nothing. But, we all as entrepreneurs, sometimes we bump into things that you might find a solution to it. And in my case, I was going to the gym, and then one day I noticed someone left the key inside the locker. And they had to come and call the manager to bolt cut the lock and drill it and all that. Lo and behold, all this is happening. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, how come there's not a lock that you can open with your fingerprint, but also with a traditional key? Simple. That was my idea. And that's kind of how the whole Benji Lock journey started. So, I'm actually excited to be here, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Excellent. Thank you, Robbie. So that kind of is a lead into my next question for everybody. And I think you all touched on it, which I'm very excited about, because many times with, entrepreneurs that don't deal with invention-based businesses, you're not really going to get into the questions early on about what type of problem did you apply, what type of solution did you apply to a problem that you identified? And obviously all of you have touched on that a little bit, but I wanted to go back around and see if you can expand a little bit on how you came about the assessment of the problem and recognizing maybe market viability. And Jake spoke to it a little bit, but I'm sure you all had your own experience looking at other potential products that were out there. And as an add-on, I know this is kind of a three-part question, but it's all kind of the same thing. They're all very complex products. None of them are straightforward and easy where you could say, well, we just put this thing together and it just came off real quick. So maybe if you want to touch on the product and engineering side before we get to the actual questions on intellectual property and things like that, because I know that's a complex element. First, obviously, there's the idea, but how do you move from idea to, okay, now we're going to have to figure out the ins and outs of producing this? Or I know when I was looking at Jake's, it looked like there's a lot of elements that went into engineering in terms of materials, and I think that's probably applies to all of you. So we'll start around with Sherrill, and if you forget any of those, then I'll jump in and remind you about those. So just as a reminder, kind of the pivot for the problem solution and kind of how you came up with it, if any changes need to be made, and a little bit about production and design and things like that, operations. Go ahead.
Well, that's a lot, Carlos, you're asking for this. But I'm going to make it real short. So for me, I think a lot of women can attest to carrying more than one bag at one time in their lives, or either taking a pair of shoes and putting it in a plastic grocery bag and taking that bag and putting it in a tote bag. And so I mentioned early on that I was taking the train in the city and I had 2 or 3 bags. I looked around the train and I noticed that a lot of women were carrying 2 or 3 bags. So I was like, you know what, this idea I think would be a great solution to eliminating the number of bags that we have. So the first thing I started thinking about was, how can I do this? Because the idea that I had was putting a shelf in the middle of the bag. So I knew nothing. I didn't know how to sew, didn't know how to draw. So what I did, you see the beautiful bags behind me, and I'm going to show you the beginning parts of it. What I did is I went to Target and I bought this bag of the same shape and size of the idea that I had. And I just started cutting it up into this idea. And so the back part was, I thought I could put my lunch back here. I could put my shoes back here. And then you see this is cardboard and tape because I didn't know how to sew. And this was my lunch bag. And I just wanted to be able to take my lunch and put it in the bottom of the bag. So I knew that that would be a solution to a lot of women because we typically carry our lunch or we have our workout clothes or things like that. But you mentioned about the engineering. So I'm going to show you the shelf right here. So I had to make the structure of the shelf so that it would hold the items on top of the bag without collapsing to the bottom. So I showed you that bag that I went to Target and got. And so you see, this is the results of that bag. Here's that little lunch bag where I kind of put it together. And then when I'm not using this, I could put my workout clothes or my shoes. But the engineering part really comes with this shelf here. And this is where the patent is that I can unzip the shelf, open it up, and convert it into a full tote bag. So I think I answered all of your questions about the engineering and how I took that problem and solved it into a solution. And that's the short end of my journey of going from idea to making these beautiful bags, tote bags and backpacks and crossbody bags.
Sorry, muted again. I'm sorry. Does everybody else hear that in the background, or is that just me? That's just me? Okay, that's something on my end. I'll work that out. But thanks for that overview. Cheryl, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dahlia and see if I can figure out this, why I have that in the background. Go ahead and take it away, Dahlia.
Thank you. Cheryl, the inside of that bag is a gorgeous color too. I'm going to have to look those up.
Thank you.
So, like Cheryl, I thought of the idea and cut up a old coat to make the new coat. But what got me to thinking of the idea was my daughter's screaming. I had learned that the coat shouldn't be worn in the car seat. I gave it the good old college try to take the coat off every time we got in the car seat. But she didn't care about the rules. She only cared about her comfort. So every time I try to take the coat off, she'd throw those parking lot temper tantrums where you just want to hide and pretend like nobody can see you and just teleport your way home. And one day I thought there has to be a better way. I can't have all this screaming every time trying to get her in the car. And I don't want to feel like the worst mom in the world when I just let her ride in a way that I know is unsafe. So I got a coat and I cut it up. I added tabs along the shoulder seams that are way back here. And I added a side zipper so that when they're in the car seat, you could just pull the whole front panel out of the way, which lets the harness sit right on the chest and shoulders with no puffy coat material in the way. And the back is thinner than the front. With those modifications, the parents can actually set the harness at a setting with no coat on, and then put the child in the coat at home and use the coat in the car seat without adjusting the harness at all, which means there's no risk of brain, neck, or spine injuries in a crash, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a worry-free way to have my child ride safely in the winter. And I didn't think a winter coat, I still don't think a winter coat should not be a danger to a child. I think you're still muted, maybe.
I keep doing that, but I had to get rid of that
Okay.
background noise. So we got rid of that. We're good to go there. Thank you for that overview, Dahlia. I do have a follow-up question for both of you, you and Cheryl, because it seems like there's some similarities in terms of customer usage. So did you go through, we'll start with you, Dahlia. Did you go through several iterations based on customer feedback in terms of the design, or did you always stay with the initial design that you had? And same for you, Cheryl, when she gets done. Did it stay the same as it originally was from the very first idea that you had, or did it change several times? And what did that process kind of look like? What caused those changes?
So the functional part, the part that makes it work in the car seat, the side seams and the middle zipper, the side zipper and the split seams hasn't changed since the beginning. I put that in the beginning so that the harness could sit right on the chest and shoulders. It stayed. What has changed a lot, which isn't really visible to consumers, is how the back is constructed. So after I designed the coat and before I brought it to market, I wanted to crash test it to see, does this coat do what it's supposed to do? And in the world of crash testing, you have to abide by something called FMVSS 213, which basically means that, there's a certain level of movement the car seat is going to have normally, even under a crash circumstance. And how much further does the child's head move? How much further does their neck move, their chest move, and their knees move? They call that excursion. And so you have to pass a certain level. But I wanted the coats to not only pass, I wanted it to perform the same as no coat. So I wanted there to be no difference between a regular coat and my coat. And in order to do that, I had already passed, but in order to get it to be the same as no coat, I had to keep making the back of the coat thinner and thinner, and work with specific materials that are still going to be warm, still be dense, but not have the puffiness that reduces the effectiveness of the harness. So in that sense, there's been a lot of changes. And then, consumers had requests. They wanted, Velcro down the side. In the beginning, I just had a zipper. They wanted to be able to get in and out fast. And I always listen to my customers and say, if this is what you want and this is how you want to use it, I add those changes in. But functionally, it's been the same since the beginning. Design-wise, just for use, there have been some changes since the first coat.
Excellent, excellent. Very interesting. Thank you for that. Cheryl, did you have anything to add in terms of maybe potential changes that happened with yours along the way?
Oh, yeah. I went through a few iterations before I decided on that panel that works really well. Went through a couple of iterations before I actually manufactured. And then I manufactured a bag that it had a different way of unzipping that panel, but it impacted the way I packed the bag while I was shipping, which added on to the cost of my shipping. So I changed it after a couple of years of shipping it one way with the way the panel was made. So yeah, it's making it easy for the customer to use, but it's also making it in a way where it's going to save me money to in the manufacturing process and shipping process.
Sure. No, great points there. Great points. Jake, we'll go over to you, and then same thing for you. Obviously, problem solution, and then also, if you want to address, production and engineering and iterations, if applicable.
Sure. So, I mean, I talked a bit about the problem solution story that Michelle and my wife and I kind of were talking about soup, and we should make it, and then we had this conversation, and I was like, oh, we should make this thing. And my research was, is it on Amazon? Can I find something like this on Amazon? And the answer was no. Then I was just obsessed with this idea. So I made some preliminary drawings like Cheryl and Dahlia. I basically went and got a silicone ice cube tray that I had in my freezer, and I cut out some of the internal compartment walls to make a bigger thing, and just to see, is it possible to pop out an even bigger cube that's more brick shaped? And it worked. So then I said, okay, well, what are the other elements of the design that I would like to modify that I think is going to make this a more compelling, better product? And we looked at kind of other aspects of trays that were on the market for making ice cubes that you might want to use with whiskey, which are kind of a little larger, slow melting ones, or things that you might, just what are the aspects of what are the dimensions of trays that are out there that people use to freeze ice? So I think there's a design principle that I had read about called most advanced yet acceptable. If you design it too forward, too futuristic looking, it's going to scare people. But if you make something advanced enough with the features that you want, but you don't make it too different from anything that they've seen before, you can kind of fit into this sweet spot of something that someone's going to see it and be like, oh, okay, I get what that's all about, and not scare them. So I thought, that was kind of interesting. So we incorporated all these design elements. Obviously, one of the key aspects of our design is this, I think one of the key innovations that didn't really exist was obviously the portion size, but I don't know if you can see the fill lines in there. So there's fill lines for a cup and half a cup in the first tray that we came up with, and also in metric, because we thought that in the beginning we might go after we want to appeal to people who've come to the US from places where they use the metric system, or be applicable in Canada and every other country besides the US where people use the metric system. And then interestingly, one of the things that we didn't do in the beginning was we didn't have a lid. No one was talking about in reviews for ice cube trays online that they thought a lid was important. So we thought, okay, a lid mold is expensive because it's plastic, hard plastic, and we wanted to make it out of plastic to make it more sturdy. And we didn't have the money for that in the beginning. So we were like, okay, we want to start this kind of in the least expensive way as possible. We're not going to have a lid. And that was like the number one piece of feedback that we got from customers. And when we first went to retail with our first retail customer, who was Sur La Table, nice high-end kitchen store, they said, hey, we love this product. We want to do it, but we want you to have a lid. So we went and made the lid because they were pushing us to do that. And then also customers were pushing us to do it. And by that point in time, we had already, sold through our first production run and had some confidence that the product there was some market validation. So we felt okay investing in producing the injection mold for this. I think one of the other things to talk about on the production side is that, I didn't have a background in production. I was I have a PhD in electrical engineering. I was an engineer. This obviously has nothing to do with lasers or anything that I studied, but so I was interested in the design aspect and then also in running the business part of it. But the production was something I didn't have experience in. So when we went to kind of think about like, how are we going to make it? I had a very good friend of mine who I called when we first had the idea for the company. And I said, hey, he grew up with me in Los Angeles. And I said, would you be interested in, participating, in starting the company with us? And he said, yeah, for sure. And he lives in China and has been there for 12 years now. And he has a long history of sourcing products there. And he's a native speaker. He's an American guy, but he lives over there. His wife is Chinese. He speaks fluent Mandarin, and he knows all the ins and outs of the factory. So I said, hey, here's a person who can be on the ground there as part of our company, source the products, and then also a big aspect of that is the trust and knowing about what you're going to get and provide and doing the QC and all that. So that was super helpful for us in terms of having the confidence in knowing what we're getting, and then also being able to talk with the factory people and the engineers at the factories about how are we going to make sure that this is a design that works for high volume, that is going to be something that that's sturdy, that has all the things that we want. How do we make the right material choices, going back and forth? So and it took having his partner Sasan, my good friend on our team, to really, I think, round out the capabilities of building the business, because it's not just having the product. You have to have a good design. You have to be able to produce it and guarantee the quality of the product so the customers like it. And then obviously you have to be able to market and sell the product. So for us, it was, putting all that together that really helped nail down the production side. And I think that, Sauce, our partner, has been an incredible asset on that side. And we get contacted by companies and people who are, trying to get help with, they're having issues with production overseas or whatever it is. And they've reached out to us because they've seen our company on Shark Tank or whatever it is. And, if I think the idea is really compelling, then, sometimes we can make an introduction and Sauce has helped a few other people because he has a sourcing company that he does for other stuff, but he make products for other people too. But so, yeah, I think that's on the production side, it's just, it's super critical to try to have your arms around as much of the supply chain and all, especially the quality aspects as you can.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that, Jake. I think you touched on some great points there, especially getting into one of my follow-up questions for everybody else, which is, the importance of your team, the makeup of that team, and your network, and everybody that had to be a part of the project in order to get it off the ground and get it moving and get it growing, right? And I'm sure everybody has a little bit of an insight into that. But before we get to that question, we'll get to Robbie. Go ahead and take it away, Robbie.
Yeah, no, I can relate with everyone. I mean, wow. everyone was touching so many different points that we could all relate in this journey. I'm gonna try to be like Cheryl. I'm gonna try to shortcut it very quickly. So long story short, after I noticed that issue with that gentleman, I said to myself, you know what? Kind of like what Jacob said. I went in and started doing all my research, and back in 2014, going to stores, all that. I couldn't see a product like this. Then I said to myself, well, at the time I was unemployed. So that's another thing that probably every entrepreneur here and everyone listening to the call that can relate, that sometimes as myself, a parent of 3 kids, wife is a teacher and all that. At the time I was unemployed, I got laid off from work. And that's kind of how this whole idea started. So it's very difficult when you're unemployed and you're at home with your kids and you're trying to figure, push this whole idea, but then how long is this going to take? And for me, it took 3 years unemployed, making this idea happen. And also you have to be able to be very patient with your family and all that to navigate all this stuff that is going on and how they can keep supporting you on your journey when they still don't understand what's going on. And I'm sure that all of us can relate in some point of another. But anyhow, 3 years working into the prototype. Myself, my background is not engineering, is not, my thing was music. That was my passion. I used to be a musician back in the day. And when I started this whole idea, I said to myself, I'm going to put my hat as the singer when I used to be in the band. I'm not the best at playing guitar, not the best at playing drums, not the best at playing keyboard. So that's when I said, okay, I need to assess and say, hey, who can help me develop this product? I'll find a person. Who can help me create this and that? And who can help me on the legal side? So I kind of did that because at the end of the day, we as entrepreneurs, we need to know how to be open. Sometimes if you think, no, this is my baby, I'm not gonna let it go, you know what? You won't grow. In order for you to grow, you have to be open-minded, let other people come in, share ideas, and then it'll help you expand. So in my case, 3 years working on a prototype, it all comes from, what you said earlier, Carlos. This was the original design. Very big product, heavy, sturdy, all that. All that was that there inside, this is what ended up being the consumer product. So as you can see, there's a big different size. And when I went on the whole Shark Tank show, it was just basically this guy. It was not, the original idea that we have today. But in shortcut, in my experience, I learned that it's always good to do partnerships if you can. In my case, one of the things that even Kevin advised me after the show was, hey, Robbie, I'll go in all with you if you're interested in licensing. And I said, hey, I'm interested in licensing as long as we can keep the Benji Lock name. That's like my baby. It all goes back to the whole trademark. That's like my baby. It's another baby for me because during 3 years of unemployed, that was like my 4th child. So for me, like to let go of the name and give it to another company that is going to take your name out and then not continue doing innovation, it's not part of my DNA. So we ended up licensing the technology to a company called Hampton Products, and they're known for all the Brinks lock security. And for them, it was a win because they said, hey, we need innovation. Let's work with Robbie and let's get this party started. So I guess every entrepreneur has their own journey. But I'm a believer that none of us know all the ins and outs, and still to this day, I'm still learning. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Robbie. I think similar to Jake there, you touched on a lot of great points. In particular, one that I had mentioned, in our first conversation about, some of the things that we wanted to talk about, which is the IP, right? We're doing this panel presentation as part of USPTO, and obviously you all have intellectual property. So that kind of leads into my next question, and I do want to touch on the point of trademarks as well. So we'll start around again with Cheryl, but I'd really like to get your insights into anything in particular that you found, not necessarily maybe even challenging, but some insights about the process with obtaining the intellectual property, utilization of it, its defensibility, anything about the intellectual property process portion of this journey that you'd like to highlight. And in addition to that, if you wanted to add in anything in particular about the value of the trademark as it applies to that for your company.
Yeah, it's really invaluable to have that. I think what was when I first learned about the whole patent and the protection. I mentioned early on that I was geeked out about it. I did my own little research. I studied other patents because I wanted to see if my idea was already out there on the market. But when I learned about the provisional patent, I said this was the best thing because it was a low cost way for me to protect my idea for up to 12 months and share it with people without feeling like somebody was going to steal the idea, because that's the number one thing as an entrepreneur. We hold on to it because we don't want anybody to steal our ideas. So the provisional patent is a great way to get started. So if you don't have to run off and get a patent right away, you have that 12 months that you can share it and talk about it with people and get feedback. So that was great for me. And then the trademark is so important because if if this is a company that you want to build and we're building a brand, and so that brand name can carry on forever. And so the trademark protects that name. And so if I'm walking in the airport and somebody recognizes my bag, they don't have to know my name as Cheryl Mosey. If they call me Minky Blue, I will answer because that means they know who the brand is. If they call me the bag lady, I will answer to that too because it says that my brand. And so the trademark is so important, but really don't sleep on that provisional patent because I was able to do that, share it, and then I went on and did the patent.
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad you highlighted the importance of the provisional patent there, Cheryl. It's really an important thing to highlight. We actually have a session in one of the breakouts where they're touching on that subject, and I think it's very important for folks to know that that's an invaluable part of the process, at least in the early stages, especially for companies that are doing market validation, which I think probably is 99% of companies that need to do some type of market validation and get some kind of customer feedback and then go through those iterations. So we'll go ahead and move over to you, Dahlia. Do you have any insights for us on your process with the intellectual property and trademarks and such?
Yeah. So like most entrepreneurs, I think when you're first starting out, you have great ideas and not a ton of money. And there's a lot of money that goes into the development of the product. And what you learn really quickly is that there's a whole cottage industry built around selling you on how to make your product and create your product. And you can find yourself out of money very, very, very fast if you're looking for a guru who just wants to capitalize on your anxiety about how can I build this. So I would say to anyone starting up to go on YouTube, read founder stories. Usually all the information you need to know, like Cheryl said, I read all these patents. All the information is out there if you're open to learning. You have to learn as much as you can and save your money for product development. What I did is I interviewed a ton of patent attorneys until I found one who was willing to let me write as much of the patent as I can and then help me fix it. I had patent attorneys who gave me astronomical numbers. I had patent attorneys who gave me reasonable numbers. I didn't pick the most expensive. I didn't pick the cheapest. So you have to find the place that works for your budget if you want to make your product work. Trademarks, I agree with Cheryl. They're so, so important. Exactly what she said. But on top of that, in the land of the internet, Amazon will honor a trademark infringement before they honor a patent infringement. Your trademark is super important. So you want to make sure that as much as you can, you have both. And when I did my trademark, I did that entirely on my own. And the USPTO is so super nice to us little people who are trying to push through our information by ourselves. So the examiner who did mine was like, I see you don't have representation. Here's what I think you can change. If you make these changes, I'll push it through. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you for your help. I needed it. So.
Thank you, Dahlia. That's great to know as well. And you highlighted another point about USPTO's resources, which are those. There's plenty of programs, the Patent Pro Bono, and then there's a lot of folks with the regional centers that are available to answer those type of questions for folks. So great point highlighting that. And I just want to reiterate the importance of taking advantage of those resources. And obviously through these type of events, we want to highlight them, and the breakout sessions do that. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, they can certainly reach out to any of the USPTO staff that are involved in any of those sessions, myself included, and Sean Wilkerson as well. Over to you, Jake, concerning IP.
Yeah, so I think when we were first getting started, like Dahlia said, you got ideas, you got a lot of stuff to do, and you don't have a lot of money. So you try to do things as inexpensively as possible. But when we first started, I remember, I said, okay, this is how much money we're going to start our company with. That's enough money to make the mold, do the first production run of 1,000 units, and file for a design patent on the tray. And maybe and I remember we were like wringing our hands over doing a patent, having the attorney do a patent analysis of what's, is there something that we could get a utility patent on? If not, why not? And what we think we should do. And so the attorney that we ended up using, I think it's a super critical decision, because, hopefully they'll be with you for a good portion, the long term on your entrepreneurial journey with your company, and you'll have other pieces of intellectual property to secure. And so, we had some contacts through friends and family, and found someone that we really liked. And he was just extremely helpful. So, we ended up having just enough money to file the first design patent on our 1-cup tray. And then, it turned out that the attorneys advised that, basically they didn't think that we could get a utility patent. So the advice was like, well, try to cover as many aspects of the design that are critical to the concept, and then we'll get as many of those patented as possible. And then the trademark, like Dahlia said, is just so important, because once you have a trademark, you can, and Amazon, I think, is the place where you're most likely to run into big time copycats and people trying to come in and undercut your cost. Is you can become brand registered there, and then if someone so much as has in their title something that is like your trademark, you can complain to Amazon and they'll make them change it and take it down. That's information. So they act very quickly, and that's it's so helpful, because the competitors, the more you grow, the more other people will take notice and will try and come in and steal your business. And I think originally when you posed the question, you touched a little bit on the enforcement side. Obviously, having the patents there so that you can take enforcement is one thing, and then enforcing is something completely different. If you think you're going to spend money on getting the patent, you're going to spend way more money trying to enforce, whether it's sending cease and desist letters out to people because they're violating some aspect of your intellectual property or your trademark, or even people who are using your copyrighted images on marketplaces like around the world on Alibaba and stuff like that. There are copyright on your images is something else that's an important piece of your intellectual property, and you need to take it seriously. And there are services, you can go do it yourself, of course, but there are services that are reasonably priced that you can use to go submit takedown requests on your behalf for people violating your trademark and copyrighted images. I think that's something that's super important to take advantage of. And then I think the other aspect that nobody brought up yet is the international patents, and where that can be helpful, but where it can also be a major boondoggle and waste of time and money. In our experience, we found that submitting for patents in China, who's taking intellectual property a lot more seriously now, was worth our time, because that's where most of the knockoffs, like the really egregious knockoffs, are being produced. And in our unique situation at Supercubes, like, because we have a team member there, we have a Chinese legal team for our intellectual property over there too, and we have prosecuted and won intellectual property suits in China and received damages from companies who have, been claiming to make our products on Alibaba and other things that we've, found out. So I think that it's just, getting to the takeaways part, like, you need to bet on success, obviously, and invest in your intellectual property. If I were, in our case, to say there's one other place besides the United States where you should be, potentially investing in intellectual property, and it's less expensive than it is here to do so, it would be to do it in China or another place where they're going to manufacture products and try to come, steal your business. So I think that's another aspect that's important to think about.
All great points there, Jake, and I'm glad you touched on the international patents perspective, and that is unique. I think I don't think many folks have considered, the importance of filing for patents. Obviously, there's the current countries that we have treaties with the PCT, patent cooperation treaties, but then there's also the element of looking at those countries where there might be some potential challenges that arise later, and then getting ahead of that.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie, on to you. Your perspectives on intellectual property.
Sure. I'll try to make it quick. So myself, when you're a first time inventor or creator, whatever you want to, you're passionate about, probably like many others, didn't know, where do I go from here? You can do Google search and all that, but then how do you really go about it? Maybe I'll plug them in a little bit, but at the time I remember LegalZoom.com. I just went in because I needed some help, and through there I kind of got guided through the whole USPTO system and all that. So props to them. And I think the first thing I did was a patent search on the technology, and the invention per se. And as simple as possible, I received a humongous book, and then I went through it. And then, kind of like others have said, including Jacob, you want to rely on someone that you can trust. So I ended up working with a really good firm, and they helped me navigate all that. And then they said, Robbie, you know what? I think you have something. You're the only one with this. So I said, you know what? I'm unemployed. I'll figure this thing out. Let's rock and roll with this. So that was my first iteration with intellectual property. But I also knew that let's work on that first, and then I'm gonna start jumping in on the whole prototype, product development, brand name, style, et cetera, because I always knew that, if you don't have something to defend yourself, or someone else already has it, you don't want to invest a lot of money on a prototype. I'm telling you, a lot of money on a prototype. And then all of a sudden you don't have that IP protection. So I think that's where, it's very valuable to learn the ins and out of USPTO and doing your research and all that. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that market validation. So for example, when I had the prototype, I remember I went in and I think I interviewed over 1,000 people locally in LA, saying, hey, what do you think of this? Give me your idea. What price do you see, that it's going to work? And after 3 years of working with that prototype, doing little small focus groups around the city, I knew that I had something. But it's always good to, depending on what category or business you're at. In my case, for example, CES is a big journey for me. So the Consumer Electronics Show is like every January is a big trade show. And I knew that why not unveil the prototype there and get more feedback, more validation, and see if it works. Thank God when I ended up exhibiting at the show for the first time, showcasing this prototype, the IP got granted the same week I went to that trade show. So it was 3 years of like it all kind of connected. And one of the things that I really like is in that show, believe it or not, I believe USPTO had a booth. And I remember going in there, my wife going in there, asking questions and learning. So I think you always have to take advantage of that. So yeah, I'll say that on that regards.
Excellent. Thank you, Robbie. All great points as well. I wanted to add as well, real quick, in addition to PCT, there's, for folks that want to look into programs within the USPTO, there's the IP Attaché program, and then there's also the Global Intellectual Property Academy. So those are two additional ones that could be valuable for folks to look into. We have a few minutes left here, and I wanted to mention three of our panelists actually were on Shark Tank. Robbie had mentioned it earlier, and Sherrill was on another excellent program, America's Big Deal. So Robbie, Jake, and Dahlia were on Shark Tank, and Sherrill was on America's Big Deal. We got a few minutes. I wanted to give everybody, I think all of our attendees, find that, certainly fascinating, some of your insights about that program. I'm sure 99, if not 100% of people watching this program today have seen it or at least know what it is. So wanted to give you all the opportunity to just give a quick insight about your takeaways from that program and any other final takeaways you have real quick. I'll give everybody a minute here at the end. Take it away, Sherrill.
Yeah, so I was featured on the first episode of America's Big Deal, which is a national pitch competition. So you do a live pitch in front of America. And I won the first episode of the first show ever, and I won $100,000 purchase order with Macy's. So I will be launching in Macy's for the holiday season. So I'm super excited about that.
Wow.
Congrats, Sherrill. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dahlia, how about you?
So I was on Shark Tank. I was on season 12, episode 7. It was an amazing experience. All the sharks are fantastic. I know they seem scary on TV, but they're super supportive crew and they can open a lot of doors for you. But I think what I would like to say to anyone who is hopeful about their dream, their idea, if you talk to anybody on the street, every single person you talk to has an idea. The difference between a person who has an idea and someone who invents their idea and brings it to market is tenacity. You have to really, really, really love your idea. You have to be ready for high highs and you have to be ready for low lows, and you have to tolerate those low lows and keep going. So if you're open to learning a lot, like I think either Robbie or Jacob said, you're ready to do the work, you're going to make your idea and your dream happen, and it'll be very exciting.
Thank you, Dahlia. I appreciate it. Over to you, Jake. Sorry, I had to jump off for a second. My dog was barking.
No worries.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing. I think that's exactly the right concept. I've often thought about, for myself, I've had plenty of ideas in the past, and what's the difference between all those ideas that kind of just like ended up, in a bin on the side and Supercubes is that I actually decided to do Supercubes instead of just think about it. And so, execute, like you can have the idea, it could be a great idea, but basically execution is like, 99% of it, So as far as Shark Tank is concerned, yeah, Michelle and I pitched on Shark Tank, same season as Dahlia. Our episode aired, I think it was number 14. So a few episodes later, a few weeks later than Dahlia. It was an amazing experience. Like Dahlia said, all the sharks we had a great time talking with them. You're talking with them for, like an hour, or every pitch is different, but you could be talking to them for a long time. It's super fun conversation. I remember when it finished, we were like, I would love to keep talking with them all day about, about this business. And then just about in general, they're all super interesting, really cool people. And obviously successful entrepreneurs in their own right. So that was fantastic experience. We really enjoyed it. If you're interested, if you're out in the audience and you're interested in doing Shark Tank, then, apply and see what it's all about. I think, it was hugely beneficial for us, the appearance on the show. And Lori Grenier, who is a partner in our business now, is fantastic, and she's been super helpful as well. So we love working with her. I think the other thing that I would say, just in terms of general advice, is when you're getting started, bet on success. Like, you have to act as if you are going to be successful. That is why it is so important to, even though you don't have a lot of money in the beginning and it's just an idea and you're not sure, like, go and spend the money and get the patent, apply for the patent, get the intellectual property, get the trademark. Like, those things are so important for securing when you have put in the hard work and you do have a viable, growing, vibrant business down the road, that you can defend it. And it's so important to have that. So, assume that you're going to be successful and bet on that, and then the other piece is, go do it. Don't sit on the sidelines. Go be the person in the arena. Carlos, I think you're muted.
Once again, well, thank you. We're going to have to forego Robbie's. I think they're probably going to cut us off here. I know we went a little bit over.
Sorry, Robbie.
Sorry about that, Sean, but such great information that we're getting from these terrific panelists. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us. It was a real pleasure hearing from you. And I'll turn it back over to Sean.